Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by an individual who'll be the first to tell you that recruiting wasn't part of her original plan. But lucky for all of us, she found her way into the TA space and she's not looked back. She's one of those individuals whose passion for helping others succeed is genuinely contagious. You can feel it in the way that she talks about career stories, candidate journeys, and the experience of a well-matched role. From global tech giants to hyper-growth SaaS teams, she's helped hundreds of people step into life-changing opportunities, and she's still humbled by every single one of those. So whether you're building employer brands, leading recruiting teams, or simply cheering someone on when they need it, she brings curiosity, empathy, and a sharp strategic mind to the world that we call talent. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the Principal Talent Acquisition Partner at Contentful, Andreea Tilven. So thank you so much for joining.
Hi, Eden. Thank you so much for such a wonderful introduction. I didn't know I'm so wonderful.
Well, I mean, it's easy when it is easy to write, because genuinely it's one of those where you see it on all the posts you put up on LinkedIn, how you communicate, and the conversations we've had. It's genuinely, you're one of the joy people to work with, or at least to speak with about the TA space. Um, Before we get into the topic of what we want to talk about today, I'm sure you're probably well prepared for this question, hopefully. I do like to start everyone with the same one, which is, from your perspective right now, what do you feel makes a high-performing recruitment team?
Um, I would say maybe you biased me with this answer, but passion for what you're doing is probably the most important thing. I think if you truly, genuinely believe in the value of matching a person with the role that's going to help them feel better and just show up better in their work and in their life, then you're doing a massive job for someone that is going to impact their entire life. We spend
Mm.
more than 50% of our waking time at work. um Honestly, that's so much of the time where if you're in the wrong space, if you're in the wrong team, if you're in the wrong culture, then that's gonna seep into the rest of your life. And I think
Mm.
I mean, hopefully not all of us have, been in those unfortunate situations where we're not the right person in the right place, but you definitely can feel that impacting on literally every single aspect of your life. So this is an important job. To anyone who is doing it with passion knows just why it's so important. And I think when you're driven by that, the small things of, this trend is changing, this person doesn't really understand what we're doing, there's a back and forth, there's volume of hiring, there's not enough hiring. I think all of these hurdles just become easy to overcome, um, because you're still driven by the same passion of, nope, I'm here to do the right thing for wonderful people. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think if I take a look at the last few years and how things have shifted in the TA space, I think passion is the one that you can't take away from those who have stuck around. And
Yeah.
not to say people who left the space weren't passionate, maybe they were, but it's clearly disappeared to some level for whatever reason to not trying to keep going. And I think that is probably one of the biggest barometers that at least I try to find. Again, when we're talking about hiring and looking for ourselves as a recruitment team as well, is you can't train energy and passion. That's the problem. You either have it really for what you want to do or you don't. And if you don't have it, I feel like find something different, which is fine. Go find what you are passionate about. Um, Obviously, the topic of today, I mean, if anyone's read the title, hopefully they have and not just blindly clicked. It's around the DE and I, and obviously, specifically, I guess more it's about kind of an honest view of where we feel or where you and I feel diversity is within the topic of recruitment. So I guess, we all know what D&I is. I mean, you can't really work in talent without understanding it. So let's just bypass that and dive straight in. I think from your own perspective, where do you feel we are right now? Do you feel we're maybe where we were 4 or 5 years ago, or do you feel we've had a shift towards the attitude towards it? What makes it up at the moment, 2025 going into 2026?
I mean, I wish I could say that my memory is very good, but that would be a lie because it's not. I can barely remember what I had yesterday for lunch, literally. I'm trying to think back and couldn't tell you. So I don't know what things were like prior to the boom of 2020, 2021, when everyone was talking about this, and it was the topic in almost every single team meeting that you had, in talent acquisition and maybe even other functions. What are we doing on this metric? What's happening with
Yeah.
this? What are we doing to show up? What are the community events that we have planned for the next quarter? It was, if not at the very top of the agenda, because it was also around the same time when hiring was at its peak, then it was definitely amongst the top three things in the agenda, right? So that's kind of what I'm comparing to day two. And I don't know if that's fair because we could definitely see perhaps a lot of trends that happened in 2020, 2021 that then went away fairly quickly, right? The spend on software and all of these different things that were the moment in time that was, the height of COVID. But if I think about where DEI is on the agenda today, it shows up as a very niche topic in very intentional spaces. And I don't know if that's less than what we had prior to 2020 or if it's the same, but it's definitely a ton less than what we had, 2021.
Mm.
Perhaps a little bit of 2022 as well before the layoff rounds started in the industry, especially in tech. And this sort of fell off the priority list very, very quickly. And right now, it feels like long term as well. It doesn't feel like it's something that is temporarily put on pause, but rather something that's been pushed down on the agenda or wiped away altogether, to be fair, in some spaces. So, yeah, that's how I'm comparing it.
Why do you think that genuinely is the case? If we take a look, and I get it, it's quite difficult to compare the boom period to the now period. To throw my own thoughts from when I started back in 2012, almost non-existent, and then there was this slight curvature, especially towards diversity and the gender side of things when it comes to technology. Then a big boom when lots of underrepresented groups obviously had a voice during, I think, the COVID period and just like post, and then again echo what you've seen, just a sharp decline. So it was kind of there, but very minimal prior to the 2019 period. And really, I'll be honest, it was really only the women in tech kind of agenda was what I kind of saw from hiring managers and from teams. Um, I guess yeah. Back to the question to you is why do you think we've seen this rapid decline and almost being non-existent on certain agendas?
I think the only reason I can see in with assuming good intent, which is I think the first thing that we need to do in every kind of situation, we have to assume that this is still something that people would want to care about, but it's just a different context. And I think the context of today, if we think of Maslow's pyramid of needs, means that we're no longer in the tip of that pyramid where money comes easy and
Mm.
hiring is plentiful, and you have so many opportunities to maybe think about how you're designing, I don't know, a team of 20 that you're hiring from scratch, and then you're thinking about the diversity makeup of that. Right now you have a lot of scarcity in terms of investment. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market. There's a lot of um sudden shifts that people almost know they have to prepare for, but they don't even know what they're preparing for. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
fear, which I think takes us, as teams in general, as companies in general. And my experience, unfortunately, is very skewed towards this sort of tech space. And it's really interesting when I speak to people in other industries who are telling me there's a scarcity of talent. And I'm like, where? Wait, no, I think there's a scarcity of jobs. And it's very interesting that if you talk to anyone who works in the energy sector, for example, then the problem looks very different. So I will caveat that everything I say is probably most relevant to people that find themselves in this sort of tech space. Let's call it
Mhm.
a bubble, even. Um, And in this space, I think right now, from a talent management perspective, I think even further than talent acquisition, from a talent management perspective, we're at the bottom of the Maslow pyramid, which is how do we create more profit, for the shareholders? How do we do more with less, right? So there are other priorities on the agenda where the DEI topic, the belonging topics, everything around well-being, I think is no longer so easily visible for people as a priority because it sits at the top of the pyramid and you're just here at the bottom, kind of in the trenches, kind of struggling to get through whatever it is you're trying to get through, right? Doing, I don't know, spikes of hiring with the same sized team in recruiting, for example, right? Because you don't want to be in a space where you bring someone on board and then you let them go once the spike in hiring has happened. So there's a lot on especially, I would say, leaders in the talent space are dealing with a lot of challenges. And they, for the biggest part, I think, carried the torch when it came to the DEI topic staying at the top of the agenda. And I think there's a lot of fatigue where this is just no longer a key priority for people. Although they probably, if they had the resources and the time, put it, right back at the top of the agenda once again. So I think that's what we're seeing. It's not a lack of care or a lack of desire. I think it's just a scarcity mindset that just leads to this being kind of left aside.
Problem you have with this though is that, and again, I don't have the studies to hand, but we've all seen statistics, we've all seen data that it links diversity of thought directly to profit. Having that diverse culture inside your business will yield better return for you as a business. So it seems almost redundant to say, hey, we don't have the resources to focus in on this, but yet we can see by focusing on it, it has a positive impact for that shareholder. I think the longer it's left off the agenda, or the longer, I guess, leaders aren't the main driver for it, what do you think the long-term impact is going to be for the ones that it really impacts most, right? Which is not the company, not the shareholder, but those from the underrepresented group. What's the long-term impact there?
I think we're going to see the exact same impact that we had when this became a topic for companies, and very quickly, once they reached into the communities of any kind of underrepresentation that they were trying to, match up to their goals as a company, they realized that a lot of folks were not prepared, for the demand that companies had. And I think it's just this, the short-sightedness of when we're ready, the market is going to be ready for our demand. And the reality is that's just never going to happen. You're going to need to meet halfway. And I know that a lot of community leaders who are upskilling these communities and giving access to these communities into the world of work are really struggling right now because they are not being met with the same support and demand from companies. And unfortunately, a lot of these community founders and leaders cannot sustain the kind of support that they've offered to their respective members. So I think it's just going to get to a point where when this is going to become important again, it's going to be such a hard uphill boulder pushing the way it was when it became a key topic for a lot of people. And what scares me the most is I can see the fatigue in a lot of individuals that are beacons of, community support in the DEI space, who will have to go through a Groundhog Day sort of situation, because they'll have to start once again with building awareness of why this is
Yeah.
important, educating people on the right terminology to use. How do we think about measuring this in an impactful way? And it will feel like they are doing the
Going
same
back to the
thing
beginning.
over and
Yeah.
over again, and they're right at the beginning. So I think these will be the worst consequences, that companies will realize that the data doesn't lie. And yes, you are right. I also don't have the numbers in front of me, but we've all been looking at those numbers throughout 2020, 2021, 2022, right? When it was just very obvious to us that increasing diversity in the workplace, creating an equitable workplace for people to then, you know, kind of stay on. It's not just about bringing the person on board, but getting them to really have a fruitful career with the company that they're joining, and making sure that the spaces are inclusive for these
Yeah.
individuals. In all honesty, it wasn't easy, and I think it was really uncomfortable for a lot of leaders in the space that never had to think about these implications before. And we're going to go right back to basics, because we're going to realize that a homogenous company cannot serve a global audience, because we don't understand 3/4 of that audience, because it's just a bunch of people that all think in the same way at a table, taking the same decisions and just agreeing with one another in just a singular direction, right? And then you realize, oh, we're missing plenty of perspectives because we don't have them here. The people are not at the table to tell us what their perspectives are. Let's bring them to the table. And you're just starting once again back up. And it's not, it's a very resource intensive kind of thing to do. And again, it's kind of a vicious cycle, because at that stage people say, and by people I mean the board, the C-suite, your executive leadership, your senior leadership team that has to divvy up the budget, says, oh, but this is like a 6 months project and it's going to be so expensive, and you're expecting this resource and that resource. Well, yes, because when you start from zero, then you need to invest a lot. It's the same
Yeah.
as creating a 0 to 1 product or acquiring new customers. It's always going to be more expensive than keeping the ones that you have and making sure that they're happy, and releasing additional features for your existing product. Starting from scratch is always going to be more expensive. So yeah.
I wanna touch upon the community part in a moment, and also that beacon element. But just to peel it back to what we could do as individuals, whilst the topic is not on the key agenda, it's not on the leadership's lips, on their minds maybe, but on their lips downwards.
Mm.
Is there any clear actions, I guess, that we can take as individual contributors in the talent space, or if anyone's listening that's out of the talent space in whatever their capacity is, that can help bring more visibility, I guess more as like a daily decision, instead of it being a from start, okay, all of a sudden we want to hit X, Y, and Z percentage from this group, whatever, right? So what we don't want to do, you're right, is get to the point where the communities are, starting from scratch with all of us. So what can we start at least doing on our part to keep the awareness going?
Networking. I would say this is one of the most important things that you can do in general. I think this was the advice that I would give candidates, if they were looking for new jobs. This is the advice I give talent acquisition people who feel like they're going absolutely insane with the same conversations with their hiring manager. Reach out, network with other people. You'll figure out you're not alone, and you shouldn't be going crazy, because if that was the case, then everyone would be going crazy, because it's the same conversation over and over again. And also, when you start connecting to people in product, you realize they have the same problem, but just with a different set of stakeholders. It's just, always down to whatever, miscommunication or whatever it may be. So the community leaders that, create these spaces that are, first of all, oriented towards educating others, are more than keen to stay in contact with companies to stay in contact with professionals and at least to understand how, from their perspective, they can guide the communities they serve. And I mean, I do this on a regular basis. I am part of, a number of different spaces where it's just about the conversation. It's just about keeping the conversation alive, almost. I think reaching out. So I think of this as if there's a table, I'm sitting on one side of the table and I'm seeing the perspective of the company, right? The reason why maybe investment is not coming into a specific area. We're talking now about the DEI space, but there's also many other spaces where money doesn't get injected, or the work is not prioritized. And then I think what happens very often, if you don't remove this table out of the way and reach out and actually speak to a community leader, for example, what ends up happening is there's a lot of assumptions made. There's assumptions that maybe this is not important, this is not relevant, maybe we should, stop having this community all together, because if a community was created with the purpose of widening participation in the workplace for the LGBTQIA community, for example, then you might at some point, as the leadership team or the leader of that community, feel like you're not giving value back to your community anymore, because there's just no jobs for them to be supported to apply for, because there's just a scarcity of roles. And I think it was really interesting. I was at an event maybe a month and a half ago. It's called Unicorns in Tech. And I think the most interesting thing that I felt when I was there is being present at an event like that. I think I spoke to probably 100, 150 people. The conversation was exactly the same, or at least ended exactly the same, with it's not you, it's the market. And I know that people hear it in so many different spaces and in so many different places, and everyone's writing it on LinkedIn. And, yeah, it's not a positive message to send to folks. But it was really interesting that when I was doing it with people in person, I think there's also a magic to just being, like a human to human connection in the physical space. It felt like a weight was just lifted off people's shoulders, because it's hard not to take rejection personally. And someone that is sitting on the other side of the table telling you this when they have no stake and no interest, I think just helps a lot to get that person to no longer relate to their job search from the perspective of it's this hopeless, cycle that I'm spinning in, but from the perspective of, oh, okay, so the market is like this, and I've been doing the same thing with the same result. What else can I do? And then this would open up a different avenue of conversation.
Yeah.
So I think just figuring out where else you can help as a talent acquisition specialist, if you don't have the jobs, if you don't, I think I was at an event yesterday, actually, and one of the speakers was talking about how, for the time being, and I know that this will change, but the bottom ladder of career is being pretty much eliminated by AI. And I think this leaves a lot of people at the start of their career wondering, what the hell am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
And this is where being in person and talking to people and getting to see their soft skills and maybe advising them, okay, try to think about what you have and what is unique to you and how you can apply it here and how you can do that, is completely just directional for those folks that don't have access into the spaces by just applying with a CV, right? Because you get to learn from every single interaction that you have with other people. And sometimes when there's a barrier and you don't even get to have the interaction, you're just stuck in the same place. So reach
You don't know what
out.
you don't know.
Yes.
Am I going wrong here? I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think the community part super important, but when I think, and that's part of what prompted me to reach back out for this podcast specifically was, I saw your posts around it, and I mean, hopefully you don't mind sharing, but just so people can at least hear the stark difference of unicorns in tech. So, um, when you first went to the event, I don't know how many years ago it was, how many businesses were supporting that event?
So I obviously don't want to, throw out the wrong numbers out there, but the
Yeah,
one thing that I know is that with the budget we had initially, set aside to support the Unicorns in Tech fair in 2022, um, we were on a wait list because not only were there too many companies that were interested and they couldn't find a big enough space, to have all the different little booths of people, right? Um, but they also had to be, somehow intentional about how they're picking each of the participant. And obviously every bit of profit that they get, they invest back in the community. But one of the differentiators was, if you're gonna support with a higher tier, then we're gonna give you priority. And it was interesting because I think we built a relationship with Unicorns in Tech through the fact that we were um, a Berlin startup at the start, and we had this history as a company that also connected us really closely to Berlin. They're obviously from Berlin, so
yeah,
I think in the end it came down to a completely different set of values and reasons why we ended up being one of the companies that had a booth. Fast forward to this year, and the event was incredible. But the reason why it was so incredible is because they put so much effort into all the talks that they had, and the different kind of support stations that they had for folks. But when it came to the companies supporting, it was crickets. Um, People were no longer fighting for a spot to have a booth and to be one of the companies that is reaching out into the community. um, and they had to, rethink of ways in which to distribute the space so that it still doesn't feel like you're walking into a career fair where the career side of it is missing, because there's
yeah.
just not enough companies reaching out with a demand. There's a lot of supply, because it's daunting, right? You're walking into this is the actual visual of what you're dealing with online in your job application. You're walking in to a space where you've queued with 20 other people. There's a few other hundreds of people in that same physical space. They are all applicants just as you, some with a few more years of experience, some with a few less years of experience, you know um, but ultimately, there's 10 or 15 jobs out there that they're all as a crowd walking towards. And now it's a little bit survival of the fittest, right? Which
Mm.
one is going to get there first? Which one is going to get there at the right time in the day when it's less crowded, when it's more crowded? It's just a really visual, for me, it was a very visual representation of exactly what's happening in the job market right now, but in a physical space. And it hits a little bit differently because it's one thing to see in your applicant tracking system 300 CVs, and it's a completely different thing to see 300 people in a room. Those two things don't bear comparison, although
Makes it
it's
more real. Like you
exactly,
see the person, a
exactly.
5'5" person or a 6'5" person. You've seen the person. You don't just look at a piece of paper. And I think when you told me that, that's why I was so keen to talk about this because I think that was the stark difference of what we all experienced a few years back to where it is now. And not to say that people aren't necessarily thinking about it, but when the jobs aren't there, we always naturally think, well, I can't offer anything to them. And then my response, as part of my French, fucking shit, you can. You can always offer something, knowledge, insights, whatever it is. But I do feel like there's this kind of like this fear element
Mm.
of, well, I can't go to that community and say, hey, we'd like to talk to your, be a partner with you, talk to you about certain things because we're not hiring, which again is, I think that's the wrong way. In my opinion, it's the wrong way to approach something like that. If you feel you can add value to that community or you'd like to partner closely with that community for a period of time or forever,
Yeah.
whatever, you should be able to kind of at least go in there and then, yeah, fair enough. You're going to have to disappoint some people who come up to your stalls and say, hey, we're not actually hiring, but this is why we wanted to come. We'd like to educate you on this. They're going to remember your company. They're going to always keep an eye and go, damn, they weren't hiring, but they are now. But they were at that event, and I remember, she told me this, or he told me that, or they told me this, whatever. And like it builds, I mean, it's brand awareness, which is the easy thing, but it builds connection. That's the more important thing.
It builds connection, and it also I haven't, yes. Let me think. When I was on the U-Bahn going to the event space, this was probably one of my fears. How am I gonna tell people, thank you so much for coming, but we actually did all of our ramping, and finalized it a month ago, so I have absolutely nothing to offer you. But none of the conversations was like that. Yes,
Yeah.
people were approaching me and saying, hey, I'm a software engineer. What jobs do you have? And then I would tell them, hey, we don't have any open jobs at the moment, but how are you finding your search?
Mm.
And then just, just a human touch of, I don't have a job for you, but I do this every day. How can I help? Was
Yeah.
just the most important thing that anyone could do from the employer side, right? Just saying, are you finding any challenges? How can I help you? And I think I gained about 50 or 60 actual connections. I'm not talking about LinkedIn connections. Forget that. That was never the purpose. But I actually gained some connections through that event, including some people who wanted to stay in touch with me about a career shift that they are planning, or just things that you generally don't know who to reach out to, because maybe in your group of friends somehow you made those friends from the same domain that you are in, right? Because we make a lot of
Be
friends
very
at
natural.
so you are trying to talk to them about a completely different domain that they have no expertise in. Your school friends studied the same subject as you, so again, they don't have. So there might be absolutely nobody in your immediate circle that you could talk to from an objective perspective about a career shift or a career change. Um, and I see a lot of value in what we offer as talent acquisition specialists as well, regardless of which specific industry we operate in. I think my most important job, I truly believe that this stays true until today, and I've been in different companies in different levels. I recruited for different departments, again only in tech, which is a blind spot of mine, but it is what it is. People, the greatest people, will always underestimate themselves and will always start from, I know I'm not good enough for this, but, and I hope that the amount of time I have told people off for doing this has helped at least a few people, where I tell them, never say this again. Never start with underestimating your skills again, because someone else that is also going for the same job as you will start with speaking up and, maybe overinflating their skills. And there is no way for the person you're sitting in front of to know that one is 100% true and the
Mm.
other is maybe 60% true. So in an interview, you have to put your best foot forward. You have to talk about your skills with most pride that you can, because nobody else will. You have to be your own cheerleader. You have to, really think of yourself as, do I see myself doing this job? If yes, then how can I talk about myself already doing that job and already being the right person for that job? Not starting from, I know there's 10 skills for this job. Let me talk about the 2 that I don't have. Why? Talk about the 8 that
Yeah.
you do have. Don't touch the 2 that you don't have. Don't worry, they'll ask you about it. And if they're extremely important, then that might disqualify you. But if you start from talking about the 2 things that you don't have, that's already gonna set the scene for you. And it's not going to be a very positive direction that you're taking yourself in. So there's been plenty of conversations like that in events I've been to, or opportunities that I had to connect with people and talk to, even at other um in other contexts, not just at Unicorns in Tech, and also in conversations with candidates. I have had to tell candidates, hey, sorry, you're not the right person for this job. And actually, one of the reasons why you're not the right person for this job is because you were not highlighting enough of the great experience that you have. I know you did this. Why doesn't the rest of the interviewing panel? Well, I didn't think I should mention it again. And at least having that last feedback conversation with people to say, no, make sure in the next interview you're in, you do mention it.
Yeah.
Just brag. This is the only opportunity where I will always advise you to brag as much as you can. It's a good practice in interviews. Brag, please do. There are your achievements. You worked you and fought really hard for them. So yeah.
I think the fact you're doing that at those events, Unicorns in Tech or others, it just shows the authenticity of what you're trying to do, not as just a talent acquisition specialist, but in the context of Contentful, allowing you to go and do that as well and showcase that us as a company are believing in this. It's not just 2020, 2021 peak, but we're still here. We are here for the community. And I think that's really the driver of this. I'm hoping it's the driver of this conversation, people listening, thinking, "Right, we're not hiring. I know it's important. I'd still like to kind of push myself there and do it and showcase to the communities that, hey, we are still here thinking about you." Because I think they're just not getting as much love as they should, and they're probably also, and comes back to the beacon, or the kind of people who are really the drivers in each cities, probably also getting burnt out from this and thinking like, what's the point? Like, I've been doing this for 10 years, 15 years, and they're the ones, when you lose them, you really lose. You really lose it. On the element of feedback, by the way, I am 110% with you, by the way. I give very, very transparent feedback, and I always pitch it to the point. And even if it's the first interview, right, they're talking to me, and I'll be like, "It's the only way for you and me to work together, right? Otherwise, I'm not doing my job as a recruiter. You're not right for this job because." And then they'll try and give me a response back of like, "The interview's finished. I'm sorry. You had the 45 minutes to convince me. You couldn't do it in that period of time. And now it's because I'm giving you the feedback. You know why you're rejected, and then you're trying to kind of go back to it." Obviously, sometimes, yeah, fair enough, it can work. I'm like, okay, you've explained yourself better there. But the majority it's about something that's quite. For example, I had one the other day that definitively is like, we want someone who wants to work, not 996, not going to that length, but it's a really early stage company. And they're like, we do longer hours. Like, we do work on the weekends. And I'm like, this is what they're doing. And the person I'm speaking to is like, I want flexibility. I've got a child. I want to do some remote work. I'm like, cool, I get it. 100% I get it. It's not right for you because this. And he's like, no, but I will do it. I'm like, I know you do it because you're looking, but I know you don't want to do it. And that's the difference between it. And I think when you give them that real honest feedback, they take a sit back and go, "Oh, okay. Like, yeah, like you're not just a standard recruiter just trying to push things through. You're really actually listening and understanding and being authentic." I think that goes back to that part.
You mentioned earlier that the contentful being who they are is also key. I spoke about myself, but I think I'm one of the least valuable people in this space. I have a hiring manager who um actually mentors, young professionals in his spare time. I don't know where he gets spare time from, to be fair, because he's a very busy professional, and he seems to also have a lot of, side quests. And, just some people just have 50 hours in a day. Okay. I don't know how they do it, and I haven't found
Yeah,
the
I
secret
haven't
just
found that
yet.
crystal ball.
Yeah,
He's got a little Hermione turntable thing,
I,
turntable thing on
they
Harry Potter. Yeah.
They must do. Yeah, it's a Harry Potter thing for sure. But we he was a first time hiring manager in Contentful, actually, when I started working with him. And we had this recruiting process for a role that was not very senior. It was, if I remember correctly, a data analyst. Nope, a business analyst. Those two are very different.
Sorry.
Very. And we were building the pipeline for this role, and one of the candidates that made it pretty far in the process um, did not get the job. It was just a matter of, okay, we have 3 finalists who are all as awesome as each other. Like, how are we going to pick, right? And it came down to some specific tools that the selected candidate had worked with, and that's how we made our decision, because the onboarding period was just going to
You're
be shorter.
splitting hairs. That's it.
Exactly, for the selected candidate. But one of the other finalists, he coached him during the interview process, but he also said, he approached me and he said, would it be unethical or like frowned upon if I reached out to this person and just offered to mentor him for future interviews? And I said, absolutely not. Just you asking this is just so amazing, because his intent was, I've seen you go through a full 360 process all the way to the end, and I saw where you had the gaps. So if
Yeah.
I just tell you where those gaps were, and not only that, but I can tell you how I've helped others overcome those little gaps of maybe not answering a question with a star method, or
Mhm.
just tips and tricks that you can always sort of bring back to memory when you're interviewing in another place, and that will help you as a candidate to land a job elsewhere, because you have a lot of promise. And yeah, he went ahead and did that. And to me, that just proves that the intent is there. And you know what? On the topic of AI, since everyone's bloody talking about it, um, I hope that this is exactly what AI will help us do. It will help this guy, Ben, by the way, that's his name. I will make sure
Dr.
he
Ben.
knows. I will make sure he knows I gave him a shout out in this podcast. I hope it will help Ben automate all the other parts of his job so that he can spend 80% of his time doing this. Just giving back to young people trying to break into this space, maybe from other places, or, people that are thinking about completely restarting their career and going into a new space. It's not going to be an easy journey, and having a few bends, peppered along the way, it's just going to be exactly what's going to make everything better. And yeah, I just hope AI will automate the rest of our jobs, and we'll just get to be
We
humans with
Ben.
each other.
All be Ben.
We'll all be pets.
Andrea, I really appreciate the candid conversation and sharing a little bit of insights into yourself, to Contentful, and obviously the community side of things. There's always too much to cover in one episode, and obviously there's a lot for people to kind of digest from this. But if someone wants to pick this up, pick the brain a little bit further, get to know you a bit more, where's the best place that they're going to find you?
Find me on LinkedIn. I'm always
Nice.
there. Whether I want to or not, I'm always going to be on LinkedIn.
I can vouch for that. You always respond to me, so it's all good. Thank you so much. Genuinely, I really appreciate it. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Eden. Thanks so much for the invitation.
No worries. Bye bye.